Okay.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that, of course, the atmosphere is ready for the elections. And as you already know, there are 17 candidates, minus at least two of them potential candidates. So we are just listening to the manifestos and how they are canvassing and waiting for the D-Day on October 29 to come and vote. But of course, the stakes are high because we have the ruling party, and then we also have 16 other parties, minus two who were unable for a lot of reasons to participate.
And according to you, what is so different with this 2025 elections from the past elections? I think that was in 2020 in Tanzania.
I think the biggest difference is that we have more parties participating in number, but the foremost rival party, which is Chadema, is unable to participate because it insisted on having reforms before elections. So I think that is what has changed, because in the previous two elections run up to this one, the foremost ruling party, I mean opposition party, participated. In this one, it won't be the case. So that is the change which is there.
Thank you so.
Maybe let me put it this way. One cannot argue with the fact that there is always room for reforming a system, particularly if you are in a nation where the ruling party from the grassroots is so dominant. And for so many years that it has enacted the laws, and it also governs the system. So the opposition is often suspicious that without reforms, which means they cannot win. And that's why they wanted reforms so as to make necessary changes to make it amenable and maybe friendly to the opposition as well. Because from their thinking, as we stand, the current setup favors the ruling opposition. From my side, I think maybe it was a question of timing, because the reforms were being called during an election year. Now, that it brings about a dilemma. Do you postpone the elections or do you go with the reforms? If you don't do the reforms, which means now that case, we are in the situation that we are now. Personally, I would say reforms are important in any democracy, because if things does not work, then you have to make necessary changes. But again, when do you have to make those changes? I think sometimes the timing is the key factor. Now, if we go back to the present time, because the elections will proceed, because we are talking about the ruling party and 16 other parties. So what we can say now is that those reforms can come at a time, and they need not be a destabilizing factor. That is from my perspective. We know one of the cherished values of Tanzania is peace and stability. That should not be tampered with. The elections will go ahead, but there has to be a time when you have to continue. After all, reforms are part of the bigger picture and an ongoing process. That is my take on the issue. I think when we are talking about what has been done, a lot has been done up to this point. And I don't think what can happen between now and the 29th can change that much. Because we are talking about a ruling party that has been there since independence, that has been spearheading development from the time of Ujamaa, that is an African brand of socialism that Tanzania pursued. And then it also oversaw the country through the crisis of the 1980s until the Bretton Woods institutions came with their own medicine and stuff like that, forcing the country to liberalize so many things, including politics, the economics, and also the media. So if we go to the 20s, starting from 2000 upwards, up to now we're talking about 2025.
Yes.
You see, a lot has been done, and we cannot deny that. And I don't think there is much in terms of policy that can be done to sidetrack the country from the achievement that it has made so far. I think the most important thing, even the contestants who are on the list, what they're supposed to do is to try to provide alternatives. Because it's not like the current government has not done much. A lot has been done. We are talking about which is a continuation from where Magufuli left. You can talk about the roads, you can talk about infrastructure, you can talk about taking service to the people, and a lot of those things. So I think what matters, I think somebody has already said that under the present conditions, I don't think there's any party that is competitive enough to unseat the ruling party. What I can encourage them is to provide alternative policies which the ruling party can listen to and also adopt even as it waits to continue with the seat of government. Because I know for a fact that the ruling party does not just simply ignore the suggestions from other political parties. Because even some of the things that are being done, it is because after listening and seeing what alternatives are there and they're being done there. Simply put, I don't think much will change from now to the 29th. What we have to do is to listen carefully to what the alternative voices, if they are strong enough, and then what they say can be accommodated. Because I don't think personally there is a party that is going to change the status quo. Because the ruling party has done a lot, and I don't think there's a viable opposition presently from the 16 which can unseat it. Because I think one of the things people forget is that you can have a party, but you might not have the mass appeal at the grassroots. And that is one of the things people often forget, that the ruling party over the years has galvanized and built a strong foundation in the rural areas. You can, in the urban centers, sometimes you can find it, there are strongholds for political positions. But in the rural areas, you find that the ruling party has entrenched itself, and that is the best.
Cameroon.
Yes, please, you can proceed.
Yes, let me stay with you. You said something very pertinent, and I would love that you throw more light on it. Now, I quite remember.
Personally, to say, I think there's still room for dialogue, because that's the most important thing. Because if you close the doors, then people feel frustrated. But if you can continue dialogue, because the 29th is just one day, we will vote, and then they will announce the leader. But then the election has to continue. And I think in this dialogue, first and foremost, we need to make sure that even after the polls, we continue talking. So that even eventually, when we have to cut out whatever necessary, that can change the destiny or improve the destiny of the country, they can continue. But I think the most important thing is continuing dialogue. Because sometimes, even when you talk about repression, who is saying there's repression? You see, I'm not denying, but I'm just saying who is saying that. Because sometimes and who is behind it. So those are sensitive issues. But if dialogue continues, that will be more important, because it can help safeguard the peace and stability that this country has enjoyed. Because when you exclude people and you close the doors, which means there will be no dialogue, that leads to frustration. So I think the most important thing is to try to explore how even those who have been shut out of the elections presently can talk and air their views. And then eventually they can reach a decision regarding how they can go forward by addressing those concerns and bringing about necessary change. But when you talk about now and the 29th, I think there's very little time. I think we just have to make sure that we have a peaceful election, and then after that, see what we can do to make sure that we continue enjoying the peace that we have enjoyed since 1961 for Tanganyika and 1964 for the United Republic of Tanzania.
Which is very important.
I think it's very subjective because we don't have the figures. But what we can say is that if you look at, for example, the ruling party CCM, they have a large base of youth, and they also the opposition party, which is unfortunately is not going to take place. They also have a large body of youth. Now, what we need to consider here is that what do the parties have in the manifesto to offer to the youth? Because presently, as we speak, I think there is a need to continue creating job opportunities for the youth. I think that is something that is going to bring them and to encourage them to continue participating in the elections. And because if you look at the education environment, I think the country has harnessed its pool, and what those people taking part in the elections have to consider is to make sure to highlight what they are going to do for the youth. I think the ruling party is trying to do that, and some opposition parties are trying to do that. But I would even go further. Instead of just looking at what the ruling party can do, the ruling party should also listen to the alternative voices that the opposition parties are raising, even those which are not participating in the elections, regarding what they can do for the youth. And then that should be carried on board. Because at the end of the day, whoever comes into power after August 29, there is a need to address the youth concern. After all, they are the future of this country. After all, they are the guardians of our peace and stability that we have enjoyed thus far. So that should be first and foremost. Because even when you're talking about creating, building infrastructure, creating jobs, at the end of the day, they are supposed to cater for the youth. I think it should be a strategic area for all the parties which are vying in these elections and those which are not taking part to consider. Thank you. When you talk about the civic society in Tanzania, it is multi-layered. For example, when you look at the women, they have their own organizations. When you look at the youth, they have their own organizations. And then some of which are affiliated to the party, for example, the ruling CF and also Chadema, they have their youth wing, which are very strong. But there are also other members of the civic society. In Tanzania, the Catholic Church is very strong. And oftentimes, from time to time, statements which are not always, sometimes they criticize the government, but they issue them. And also, there are also other organizations, I think that's why sometimes they come into trouble with the law, other religious bodies besides the Catholic Church. And also, you also have journalist association led by the Media Council of Tanzania, which also speak to try to make sure that the journalists operate and abide by the law, and also they act with responsibility. So when you talk about the civic society, just the political parties is just one thing. They are multi-layered, and there are many either religious, non-religious, but they are there. And that's why when the political parties, they're selling their manifestos, they need to reach out to these groups because they know that if they try to cheat them, then they'll expose them. And So we can safely say that there are many groups operating in Tanzania which can be dubbed the civic society. I think by and large, a lot has changed because even when you were talking about Mount Kilimanjaro sometime back, people used to think it was in the neighboring country when it is in Tanzania.
Yeah.
Now people know, and a lot has been done to popularize a lot of these tourist attractions, not only for the international market but also domestically, because a lot of Tanzanians are increasingly going to these places. But what I can say, one of the answers, because if we go back to the 1990s, we used to have what they used to call the stowaway problem in Tanzania. When youth used to believe that going to Europe is their passport to heaven. But now that has since changed, particularly after the changes that were made in the late 1990s and from 2000 and from 2000 upwards. But there's also a lot that has been done because besides agriculture, whether we like it or not, Tanzania was for a long time known as an agricultural country. Now tourism is contributing, I don't know, I don't have the figures with me, a lot to the GDP, and it's still growing. And a lot, I have my friends who are doing research in trying to see how they can harness tourism in a comprehensive and also eco-friendly manner to make sure that the country reaps dividends from that. And also, while doing that, make sure that the local population, particularly the youth, benefit from that. So there's a lot that is going on in there. And when we also talk about the mineral sector, we realize that Tanzania now is no longer just an agricultural country, but is also emerging as a giant in the mining sector. And those are some of the policies that need to be solved, not only to the country, but also to other countries. And also, we also put into context within Pan-Africanism, when we are united, we are strong. When we look at individual African countries, we see that their markets are very, very small. But when you look at the East African bloc, when you look at the Civic bloc, when you look at the West African bloc, and you bring them together, you find that the market grows. And when these countries speak with one voice, when they speak with one voice beyond just the lip service under African Union, you can find that we will also be able to be such a force and such an economic force that people, they will also respect. And I think because Tanzania has been Pan-African, because if you look at its role in the frontline states, if you look at its role in the East African region, if you look at its role in trying to make sure that the country collaborates with others, you find that you cannot question its standing in the international or Pan-African spirit. So what needs to be done is to see how the youth and other members of the society can be brought on board so that they can continue building that spirit and make sure that even as we go beyond October 29th, our country remains strong, our country remains united, our country continues with dialogue by including even those who are currently not taking part in the elections. Because if we continue dialogue, we continue building, and we continue working on the Pan-African spirit, what that has created an identity that has made many nations in the neighboring countries feel Tanzania is a safe haven. Then we'll continue building that spirit. I think it's important to keep that in mind. It's not like we're not doing anything. We are doing a lot to try to build that reality within the emerging opportunities in Pan-Africanism. Thank you. I think the message is that they have to be open with their manifesto. They have to be open with the people that they address. They have to be open with the electorate so that their manifesto are clear and convince the people that they are voting for the right candidate. Without doing that, which means they will be shortchanging the electorate. But we are at a point where using various media, whether now, of course, it's the most effective way, radio, which reaches the entire country, they need to use that to communicate their message so that people, the electorate, the young, the youth, the women, and also children can vote while well informed about their policies and what they need to do. I think that is very important. Then, as a way forward, there is also a need to continue with the dialogue. And I think the solution is supposed to be within us, without, without external interference. Because once external interference comes in, then it ruins everything because it becomes divisive. But we want to cherish and we want to continue and remain united. That's the most important thing. And that is the message that must be sent home to everyone. Thank you.